Help myself.
Wow, that's a weird. I don't remember that. Is that Winona Ryder sitting there with Dennis Quaid in Great
Balls of Fire with Alec Baldwin as Jimmy Swaggart?
You just like saying that name, don't you?
Come on, we got a little mileage out of old Alec.
All right,
had to pull it.
He's everywhere.
Yes, he is. Yes, he is.
You think he'll be let free? Will he be allowed to escape the wheels of justice, Hunley?
I don't know. I don't see. Well, right now he's maxed out at 18 months tops.
He's maxed out at 18 months. That's all he can get.
So
that's it. He can't get any more.
Nope.
Maxed out. Unless he does something between now and then.
He'll try to do something stupid or say something stupid, I'm sure.
Right.
But fortunately, fortunate for him, there's that ceiling of the 18 months instead of 6 years and 6 months.
Right. Well, that always seemed odd that they were throwing that on there at the end. That kind of came out of nowhere, didn't it?
Yeah. Especially find out that they just created the law in 2022.
Well, I think they didn't create it. It was just the enhancement was enhanced. Brandishing was enhanced a little more. As to
maybe.
What brandishing? If you look inside, there was the law. They didn't create the law. It was an interpretation of a more drastic interpretation of brandishing, I think, is what it was.
Could be, but then the other thing is that I think she had to be frightened when she obviously wasn't frightened, or some fear element had to be in there, but it was inappropriate.
Well, the judge thought so that's the end of that,
Yeah, next will probably be the end of the prosecutor at the rate they're going.
Right. I mean, we don't know if that's next. Interesting. It'll end up with Halls being the only one to go to jail.
Well, Hall's already made the deal.
Right. No, but I'm saying Halls will be the only one with probation
or a sentence at all.
At all. Yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah.
I'm sure Hannah will probably get something, but she's got to be taking the legal.
Enhancement was taken away too.
No, I know that, but she's still got the 18 months. So they both still have 18 months that they got to contend with.
Right.
But she should be very thankful that Baldwin's getting charges tossed for him, because they're like a pair.
Right. Well,
you toss one, you toss the other.
Free legal aid from the Baldwin team.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Halls is not going to get that. Halls has that one attorney down there in Santa Fe.
Definitely. So, okay, before we get started, you were going to tell everybody about Belzer.
I don't know about everybody about Belzer, but I mean, Belzer wrote that book about the 100 people that died from 100 people who were witnesses that died.
Hit list?
The hit list book, yeah, which was a big seller. Surprisingly, probably because of his name recognition. I think it's kind of encyclopedic. It's just one name after another. Whether it all adds up, I don't know. It's 100. It's a nice round number. I don't know if 100 were killed. Who killed them? Is another question, I guess. But it's a weird thing about Belzer, because he and Gilbert, who we lost earlier this year, were very close. And Gilbert and Belzer both made their bones at Caroline's in New York. Caroline being the owner of Caroline's. Belzer, I just remember going to see Gilbert with Belzer standing next to me all the time in the back of Caroline's. And there was another time, Belzer's brother also, I think, committed suicide a couple of years ago, jumped off a building. I knew his brother, so I forget his first name, maybe David Belzer, but he wasn't a comic. Anyway, so what I wanted to say with my memory of Belzer was I didn't really watch him in those cop shows, because I knew Belzer as the comic, even though he did 20 years and lived in France, had a poodle or whatever was going on with him. When I produced the first Toyota Comedy Festival with Alan King, the legendary Alan King, it was at Lincoln Center in New York, opening night. And David Dinkins was there, the mayor, showing me pictures of his grandchildren. He was kind of like the earlier version of the current mayor of New York, who's there now, very Dinkins-esque guy who's there now. But anyway, so David Dinkins, or I think had been borough president of Manhattan, was on the side of the stage with me. And there was a comic out there who was bombing unmercifully, using all kinds of foul language. Now, the audience was women in mink stoles, Eric, because it was Lincoln Center. So a lot of the members, let's put it that way, annual members had the right to show up for any event. So they went to this thing. So the woman who was the comedian was bombing unmercifully, using tons and tons of foul language. And everybody said, we got to get her off the stage. And that was Whoopi Goldberg. And even Dinkins said to me, she's got to go. And I said, we know that. So we went backstage, and there was Buddy Hackett. And Alan King said to Buddy, can you go out there and do about 20 minutes? So somehow we got Whoopi Goldberg off the stage. And Belzer was backstage too. He wasn't performing. But somehow we got Whoopi Goldberg off the stage, and Buddy Hackett went out, and he didn't do 20 minutes. He did an hour and 20 minutes. Okay. And one of the greatest performances I ever saw in my life. Again, I had never seen, other than on film, Buddy Hackett. So I never saw him live. But to go out there and just wing it for an hour and a half of just, it was breathtaking. It was absolutely breathtaking. It just blew my mind. Anyway, after the show, when the place was empty, Lincoln Center was empty, backstage were three men in the dressing room, in the green room, in the dressing room. And that was Alan King, who was the producer, Jerry Lewis, and Buddy Hackett. And me and Belzer were sitting on the couch in the dressing room like two little boys. And we're just sitting there enthralled as these guys are ripping open bottles of scotch, pouring themselves drink, taking their tuxedo ties off, and completely ignoring that me and Belzer were there, talking about the heyday of Las Vegas and their incredible stories, right? At one point, I just said to Belzer, can you believe this? And he just said, shut the up and listen. And I just said, and he didn't say anything either, but I just couldn't believe it. And the two of us sat there for over an hour and a half, me and Richard, just flies on the wall, listening to Alan King, Jerry Lewis, and Buddy Hackett talking about Vegas and show business from the 1950s. Just an amazing, amazing night. And that was a long night with Richard Belzer that I really appreciated, knowing him and being with him that night.
Well, it's incredible. Now, as far as his TV career, many people probably already know it, but I believe he was in 10 different shows playing the same character, or it was really like 10 weird. Or 20.
Yeah. I don't know how he myself. Yeah, it's a weird story. Yeah.
Well, I watched him in Homicide.
Right.
In the 90s. That was kind of one of those really good shows that was underrated. You know, it was critically loved, but didn't do great with the audience. David Simon, before he did The Wire. And then I guess he got the same character on Law and Order, but he played Detective John Munch,
yeah,
all over the place. And I mean, that's kind
bizarre.
Of a slick, it's
bizarre.
Cool though.
Yeah.
Playing the same character all over the place. It's like the old days of the crossover TV shows.
Yeah, I mean, nobody hated the cops more than Belzer, so it's kind of ironic that he'd be working with a cat named Ice-T, who was a pimp by his own admission for many, many years, beating up women and throwing them out into prostitution, teamed up with an anti-authoritarian JFK assassination expert named Richard Belzer, who was a top stand-up comic, you know, for most of his adult entertainment life. Only in Hollywood. The strangest bedfellows could come together. Just a very, very strange career that he had.
Oh, that's right. And apparently he bought his French home from suing Hulk Hogan.
That's right. That's right. Because he said wrestling was fake, and Hulk Hogan got him in a sleeper hold to prove it wasn't fake. I don't know. Maybe it was the violence part that he won the case under. I don't understand exactly what he did. Apparently,
Nate was talking about earlier with me, but I guess he did the sleeper hold,
Mhm.
and just like dropped him.
Yeah, no, I remember
So
when it
he like
happened.
it hit
Yeah,
his head, and what? So that might have been as just the
but I mean, he was
overflow.
asking for it, Belzer. He was the one. He got into the thing with him. I mean, I don't know. It's water under the bridge now. Rest in peace.
Sure, sure.
That's all I could say. I don't know about his final last words. Seems to be some dispute about that.
Why, he said something special or what? I didn't
Oh
get it.
yeah. I think the people in the chat know what he said as he was leaving the earth.
Okay.
I
Wow.
can't say it here, but you can look it up if you want to.
Amazing. Okay.
All
So
right, so that's that. You know, there's always these people. I don't know if you noticed them in the comments. They put up a timestamp as to when we actually get into the story that they've signed up to watch.
11:52.
I just find, and at first I didn't know what it was about for months. I was just going, why are they putting up these timestamps?
Mm.
And apparently, some of the people actually wrote it out saying what it was about. And I just thought, I just find it very odd because I don't separate the story from what we're doing now. You know
Sure.
what I mean? I don't separate it into two different things. And this particular story is really, for the first time, I don't know if we've ever done this. This is a story of actually 3 men in one story, Eric. I don't know if we've ever done multiple men in a story or multiple women, have we? Or
Yes, we did a couple weeks ago, JFK. It wound up being, it was 2 people. The Florida plots.
oh, right, it was Miltier and
I forgot his name.
what was the guy? Oh, it was the guy down in Florida, in
Yeah.
Miami. Yeah, that was true. This is a completely different kind of story because this is a story of 3 first cousins growing up in total poverty in 3 super close families. In fact, Jerry Lee and Jimmy Lee Swaggart are double first cousins. Mickey Gilly, which we'll get into separately, was a regular first cousin. All the families are related. It was kind of like a brother and sister marrying a brother and sister, Eric, if you follow what I'm saying.
But on the opposite ends, yeah.
That's considered a double first cousin. I never heard that before, but apparently quite common in places like Ferriday, Louisiana.
If the town is so small,
yeah,
there ain't a lot of variety of the pickings.
Well, Ferriday goes back to the 1920s when there were just slot machines everywhere and saloons and bordellos. This was a party town from day one. You know, when Huey Long was governor.
Interesting.
It was also 2/3 black, which people don't remember back then in the 1920s, 30s, 40s. But that's where these guys got their musical influence. Now, just for the sake of Mickey Gilly, which most people may not know who Mickey Gilly was. If you're country, you know who Mickey Gilly was. I think he passed away in 2001 or 5.
No, 2022. He
passed recently?
Both.
Yeah, right. Okay, Mickey and Jerry Lee. Right,
both died last year.
Right. Okay. His club was closed, I think, in 2005 or 2004. There was a club he had outside of Houston. I think it was Pasadena, Texas, called Gillies. And Gillies was the place where they filmed Urban Cowboy with Deborah Winger, Scott Glenn, and an obscure guy named John Travolta. Really a good movie, fantastic movie at the time. And he had the robotic, if people remember the movie, of course, the robotic mechanical bull that you would ride for time and prizes and everything else. And then Gilly would play in Gilly's place. Mickey Gilly would play in his own club, which is not unusual. But the 3 of them together literally are months apart in age and grew up in the same town and literally had overlapping family members, all of whom the Heron sisters, who were their mothers, Elmo, who was Jerry Lee's father, Mickey Gilly's father, and Jimmy Swaggart's father, who was known as Son. Jimmy Swaggart's father was known as Son. His grandfather was known as Pa. Every one of them played music at a masterful level and could care less about music as much as these guys did. It was just something that was a hobby, Eric. That's who's that there? That's Jimmy, Jerry, and Mickey.
And Mickey.
Yeah. You seem to be able to find photos of them, of people in this series months before they're about to die.
Yes, I do.
That's your expertise.
But I also find them earlier too. This is many months before they died.
Yeah.
I figured this is when a lot of the meat of the story takes place. Looks like it's about in the 80s.
I don't know where the meat of the story takes place. It's a wide story. I mean, when these guys are growing up at the age of 9, Jimmy Lee Swaggart begins to have visions. And I mean, visions of cities melting in 1944 that he has no explanation for, that turn out a year later to be Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So he becomes kind of like this golden child of visions, religious visions and predictions, where he becomes revered. Now, Jerry Lee, on the other hand, at the age of 7, is a complete savant, sits down at a piano at a like a car show or a car lot where they had a band, sits down at a piano and just starts pounding away as if he'd been playing for 20 years. So he was a savant. Now, granted, these people came from musical families. Jimmy Swaggart, also unbelievable piano player, but gravitates, which we're going to explain, towards religious or Christian music, more evangelical. And he has to wrestle with that, as they all do. Mickey Gilley, is probably the most balanced one of the group. Now, keep in mind, when I say group, I mean all 3 of them would run around Ferriday, Louisiana, robbing houses and robbing stores.
Oh, really?
Yeah, all 3? Yeah. All 3 together. No. That's why I didn't want to separate the 3, Eric, because they are a musical team, a crime team.
Thick as thieves.
Thick as thieves team. You know, there's a lot of symbiosis between the 3 cousins. And all I could say is Mickey Gilley had 17 number 1 country hits, and as his guitar player used to say was 16 and a half, you know, on their stage banter. And Mickey would go, "What do you mean 16 and a half?" And he says, "Well, one of those was a duet with me, so you don't get full credit for 17, you know, as part of their stage banter." But Mickey, you know, was not a minor figure. And I'm starting with him first because a lot of people gave him short shrift in this trio. But Mickey Gilley made a lot of money, sold a lot of records, had a lot of fans out of Houston, much more of a regional talent than the others. But going backwards in time, these kids did not like to go to school. They wanted to go to these black nightclubs. One was called Haney's, not so much that it was completely black, but had black performers, let's say, and to somehow listen to these guys play and learn from them, which is what they did.
Well, they were contemporaries of Elvis.
Well, we're going to get to that in a second.
Similar background. I mean, the black influence, the black music, that kind of makes sense.
Well, we're going to get to that because what happens is the real important part of this story is the Assembly of God Pentecostal Church, of which Elvis also was a member, but outside in Tupelo, as opposed to Louisiana. Now, keep in mind, Natchez, Mississippi is right across the river. So they're very close to Mississippi and Baton Rouge, and just eastern Louisiana is where Ferriday is. Really far eastern Louisiana, about 100 miles north of Baton Rouge, the state capital. So we in this series seem to spend a lot of time in Louisiana, Eric. There's a lot of stuff going on down there that I've learned about. But what happens is he begins to have these visions in 1944, and he's a mama's boy. Jerry Lee is a mama's boy, and Mickey Gilley is a mama's boy. And these mamas really try to keep them on the straight and narrow. And they do things, like I said, they do some criminal things, nothing major, you know, like murder or violence or anything like that. But there is
teenagers, troublemaking.
Right. So they would rob these businesses and then go to the police and talk with them saying, "Hey, did you hear about that robbery?" They'd literally go to the cops the next day and talk to them about, who do you think did it? That's how brazen they were, these kids. I mean, these were some, you know, really, really pesky teams.
Something tells me the cops kind of were probably onto them at the time. If it was a small enough town, they're probably like, those damn kids.
When Okay, so Jimmy and Jerry Lee both are tortured, and I mean tortured, by the pull of the secular world and the pull of the evangelical church. Both of these guys, Mickey not so much, but Jerry Lee, even this is way before he becomes Jerry Lee Lewis, the rock star, is completely tormented by whether to get involved with secular music. He is as religious as Jimmy Swaggart is. And their relatives talk in tongues. Their mothers talk in tongues. They become part of the Pentecostal movement, which has waxed and waned over the years. In 1906, I think there was a woman named Parham out of Kansas who began to speak in tongues. And there was another guy, a black dude named William Seymour, who hears her. He begins to speak in tongues. He goes to LA. Parham is in Kansas. And this begins to spread the Pentecostal word and the talking in tongues and Pentecostalism and evangelicalism in the United States has multiple waves. There's periods of time where it's really big. It goes back. It comes on again, comes back. But one of the people who adheres himself to it is Jimmy Swaggart. And he does this as a teenager, even though they're committing crimes. This is hard. People seem to think that, and I used to think this too, like once you go down that road, you never go back. These guys had one foot in each world. They were torn apart by these two worlds of going to church, which they did, or committing crimes, which they did, or playing, rock and roll hardcore music like they did. Of course, there's Jerry Lee possibly at one of these shows. I don't know what that is there, but that's a little later. When he starts to play piano and his father, Elmo, sees that he's a savant, his father, who is extremely harsh, as all their fathers were, goes out and buys him a $900 piano and puts it in the middle of the living room. $900. And that's
a lot of money then.
Okay. These people are so poor that one night the mother gets into a fight with Elmo and throws a pot of boiling black beans out at him as he's leaving the house. And the black beans goes into the dirt as he flees his own wife, throwing hot black beans at him. And the family had to pick the black beans out of the dirt to eat dinner that night.
Oh, wow.
That's the level of poverty that I'm talking about for all three of them. It was hard to have a car. They had a guy named Lee Calhoun. They're all named after this guy, Lee Calhoun, who's kind of like a Mr. Haney in Green Acres, who shows up to collect the rent, but dresses like a complete hobo. He owns every single rental property in Ferriday, Louisiana, and he drives an old beat-up pickup truck with no passenger side door. So people believe that he's completely impoverished, but he wasn't. He was the wealthiest guy in Ferriday, Louisiana, and Lee Calhoun marries a Heron, so he's part of the family, this guy, although nobody's got money for anything, other than going to school and barely putting clothes on people's backs of these family members.
Wow.
But put it this way, that photo you showed of Jerry Lee is 1952. And in 1952, Jerry Lee is making $20,000 a week. At 1952, he's making $20,000 a week. Jimmy Lee Swaggart is making $30 a week. Okay, just so you understand the difference in economics. Now Jerry Lee feels completely guilty, and he goes out and what happens is the father of Jimmy Swaggart, son Swaggart, finally opens up a grocery store in town, and the family's economics gets lifted to a lower middle class, right? And it has some stability until one day the father gets the bug and says, I'm going to become an evangelical preacher and take the family on the road. He gets the calling, and Jimmy says, oh, no, not this. You know what I mean? We're going to have to go around Louisiana preaching, and they do. They live in church basements. They live in people's attics. They make absolutely no money. Jimmy Swaggart, is going to the movies one day to see Hopalong Cassidy. And as he's buying the ticket, he hears this is, I guess he must be 11 or something, or 10. It says, "Don't go into this place. Give your heart to me. I've chosen you as a vessel to be, to use in my service." This is what he says he hears in his mind, the voice of God. He doesn't buy the ticket to go into the movie theaters and becomes this preacher where he's preaching in downtown Ferriday, Louisiana, on the back of a pickup truck. And a cop comes up to him and says, "You've really got the fire, son." And he did. He really did. And he was a savant in preaching, like Jerry Lee was a savant in piano playing. Now, this is interesting because when Jerry Lee goes to record at Sun Records with Sam Phillips, Phillips also offers Jimmy Swaggart evangelical albums and an evangelical contract because he is so good as an evangelical piano player and singer, Jimmy Swaggart, that Phillips wants to corner that market, which is cornered by Columbia Records out of New York at the time, of what we would now call Christian rock, Eric. This is this evangelical music that Swaggart is playing in these churches. And he turns down the contract from Sam Phillips, saying, "I cannot be involved in secular music, sir." And Jerry Lee understands that. But Jerry Lee is already Jerry Lee Lewis. And he's already ripping up and shredding everything in sight as a rock and roller.
This is an odd question on that, but it makes me wonder. It seems like they all kind of peaked at different times. Like Jerry Lee was the first one, and he became, superstar, megastar, right, top act in the world.
Right.
Mickey Gilley, a little later, I think, became the top of the country world. Or, was one and then Jimmy Swaggart kind of was the last of them to come up on his own. Or
what I'm saying is, it was intentional, though. He could have taken that Sam Phillips contract. He chose not to. He could have been huge back even before Mickey Gilley. He chose not to do it because of his evangelical beliefs. But he later, like you said, it becomes a multi-million-dollar operation. With TV, radio. It starts out with radio and then expands from there. And he becomes the number one evangelical preacher in the country. Now, that being said, you had guys like Oral Roberts, who had come out of that world, who was older than him. Mm-hmm. You would have Billy Graham, right, Eric?
Yeah.
You had the not so famous, my favorite preacher name, Mordecai Ham. For anybody out there who remembers this guy, Mordecai Ham, not to be confused with Shlomo Bacon or Yitzchak Pork, two of the other more obscure evangelical ministers. But there was a Mordecai Ham, by the way, just so you know.
That was the generation prior. Oral Roberts, Billy Graham, Mordecai Ham. I vaguely remember him.
Yes.
They were the tent revival folks.
The reason they were tents is because they didn't have a church. Mm. They physically didn't have a church. So they did it outdoors. That's what he did also, Swaggart. But his father and mother did it before him. And his brother, who will die, also did it. And then he did it. And then eventually he spun off into his own thing as Jimmy Swaggart. Boy preacher, one of those deals, you know what I mean? And took on a life of its own. But he was a true believer. At one point, even living in total poverty, Jerry Lee shows up, takes him to an Oldsmobile dealership and buys the family a $3,000 Oldsmobile so they could travel around as a family, But even as a preacher, he goes back and robs houses. He has these failings where somebody explained it, that a lot of evangelicalism is having, your arms wrapped around God and then having a slip. You know what I mean? And then coming back constantly sinning, constantly having redemption, constantly sinning.
That could be Catholicism too, similar.
Right. I mean, you could say that.
Sin, repent, sin, repent, sin, repent.
And you could see that with the Catholic mob the same way, that they would execute someone and then go to church, mm-hmm. So yeah, maybe it is similar. I don't really know, but There was a clip that I showed you. This is great. This is years later. This is like, I want to say like 1984 when he was on CNN with Tom Braden and Pat Buchanan. That was remember the old Crossfire, Eric?
Mm-hmm.
Well, they used to sit so close together. Tom Braden, who was a subject of another episode for us, was the left, and Pat Buchanan was on the right. And they're both grilling Swaggart. This is the adult Swaggart, about his religious beliefs. It's really a bizarre show because these are personal religious beliefs, and Buchanan is expressing his Catholic beliefs, and Braden, oh yeah, here's Swaggart. Yeah, this is 84.
And I consider that I do the job well. I'll be honest with you. It's my job to carry out the Great Commission of Jesus Christ, to take the gospel to the whole world. And that's exactly what I'm trying to do. I'm not a charlatan. I'm not a fake. I'm honest. I'm sincere in what I do. And I think, Mr. Braden, you know that I am.
Well, I won't argue with you about the 60 million, but I'm quoting authoritative magazines and newspapers when I say it. But you say that you're preaching the gospel of Jesus Christ, and yet you say Catholics are poor, pitiful individuals who think they enrich themselves spiritually by kissing the Pope's ring. Now, that's a gospel of hatred, and that's not the gospel of Christ.
That is not a gospel of hatred at all, sir. Not whatsoever. I respect the Catholic people. I respect the priest. They sacrifice an awful lot to do what they do.
Well,
Anyway, that gives a...
Yeah, it gives you an idea. It's interesting because Pat, who is much more knowledgeable about religion than Tom Braden, later on we'll get into a debate with him about Calvinism and just really obscure stuff. Fascinating interview. If you could find it at home, maybe we could post it online.
Sure.
Goes on for a while. Oh, here's Pat. Go ahead.
Couple questions on
Certainly,
that.
surely.
You say, look, I must speak the truth and what I know to be the truth, and you're relying on the Bible, okay?
Right.
Now, what makes Jimmy Swaggart of Baton Rouge, Louisiana's interpretation of the Bible correct, and the interpretation of the Holy Father in Rome and the councils and the others all false?
Well, it's not just Jimmy Swaggart. There are multiplicity, millions of Protestants that believe the literal interpretation of the Word of God. Most Catholic doctrine, Pat, is based on church tradition. And I don't doubt the sincerity of multiple millions of Catholics. I don't doubt the sincerity of the priest. It's not only Catholics.
But what makes Jimmy Swaggart's interpretation?
It's not Jimmy
correct?
Swaggart's interpretation.
All right, whose is it?
There are literally hundreds of thousands, even millions of preachers that stand behind pulpits
There are hundreds of
that
thousands.
say the same thing I say.
And there are hundreds of thousands and millions of priests who say one thing,
You see this right here? This is the Bible.
right?
That's what I go by.
Where'd it
That's
come
what
from?
I live by.
Who brought it down?
Not the Catholics, sir.
Who brought it down?
Not the Catholics.
Who brought it down?
This book was written, the Bible says, as holy men of old were inspired by the Holy Spirit.
All right.
Anyway.
Okay, so when the Pentecostal movement starts and they start talking in tongues, there were people who were laying in the aisles. There were people who would literally roll down the aisles, tumbling head over heels, which is where the phrase holy rollers comes from, Eric, which the media constantly refers to Jimmy Swaggart as being a holy roller. People would literally roll down the aisles in a church. Now, it's interesting that he's being interviewed by the secular Tom Braden, who, remember, they made the TV show 8 is Enough, based on his family. He had like, him and his wife had like 8 kids. And he was also revealed to be a member of an obscure organization with 3 letters called the CIA, which we covered in a previous episode if anybody wants to take a look at that. So the fact that he is the one grilling this evangelical Christian out of Ferriday, Louisiana, I find to be really interesting, you know, and at one point near the end, Swaggart and Buchanan team up to attack Braden. And he says, you don't know anything about religion, sir. I suggest that you read the Bible. This is Pat Buchanan to Braden. Because keep in mind, this is crossfire. You know what I mean? And they're both firing at Swaggart.
Right.
But then they team up against Braden for being which I found to be really fascinating. But going back to Sun Records and the $1 Million Quartet, I mean, you had Carl Perkins, Johnny Cash, Elvis Presley, and then Jerry Lee Lewis. all of these people came out of the Christian church. All of rock came out of the South. All of it was linked, and especially with Elvis and Jerry Lee, who became very close friends, both Assemblies of God. Both came out of the Pentecostal church. Both of them wanted to be evangelical singers. Both of them put out evangelical albums, and Elvis did. Both of them lost a brother at an early age. Both of them lost their mother and spiraled out into a black hole over the loss of their mothers. And both of them had very young wives, Eric. Very young wives. I mean, Elvis, don't forget, when he was in the Army, his future wife, I think, was 15 or 16 years of age. Not to be outdone, Jerry Lee's was 13 and he was 17, Myra, which is depicted by Winona Ryder in the movie. But not uncommon, as their parents had married 17 and 15 of that age. And also not uncommon that they're partially related. As some of his relatives said, everybody's related in Ferriday, Louisiana. You'd have to go out to another city far away to find someone who was not related to you. So even
it was common. It was common in a lot of the country.
Right. The reason I mention is because this single-handedly almost destroys Jerry Lee Lewis's career. He goes from making $10,000 a night to $250 a night overnight. He gets He gets banned from American Bandstand. Dick Clark, absolutely embarrassed because he had personally helped save Dick Clark's economic life at one point. Dick Clark later apologized to him in person and on air. It started in England, actually, when he went to England and got kicked out of England for this thing. But it spread quickly through the U.S.
Wow, amazing.
But there's Myra on the right. Yeah, she looked very young.
She looked 13. I mean,
She looked 13. He's 21, I think, in that picture. So he's a little bit older. But yeah, he moves in with the Brown family with his own wife. He's got another wife. He's got his own wife. We married at 17 and she was 15, I believe, if those numbers are correct.
Yeah, Jimmy was 17 and married her at 15, which is pretty close. I mean, there's no
right. This was 21 and 13. But nevertheless, I mean, these people had stunted emotional growth. He was probably an alcoholic. His father was an alcoholic. He had a temper. He would get into fist fights in these clubs, and we told a story about him and Chuck Berry. We don't have to go over that again. When he sets the piano on fire, he did not like to be the warm-up act for anybody, which we covered in another episode somewhere. That's kind of how it ended before Chuck Berry came out. Setting the piano on fire. But so anyway, so this music was considered extremely sexual, extremely secular, extremely anti-Christian, and was sweeping the country. And there's one.
Well, they also, if I recall, they have issues with dancing.
And dancing was part of it too.
And and Elvis with his hips, and Jerry Lee wasn't exactly calm.
Well, keep in mind, the evangelicals were opposed to anything involved with dancing and this type of lifestyle. So not unusual. He is supposed to go on in 1957. He's supposed to go on Ed Sullivan, and Ed Sullivan won't even put him on. And so who puts him on is Steve Allen on the Tonight Show, where he came on a bunch of times to the Tonight Show. And I think Ed Sullivan might have regretted not putting him on there. But he was too much. I mean, keep in mind, Elvis had the lower portion of his body blacked out on TV. You couldn't block out all of Jerry Lee Lewis. It was just too crazy. But I mean, these three, they're the same age, from the same town, and the same backgrounds, and the same religion, and they come from such incredible poverty that all three of them, to make it, is, to me, one of the greatest examples of the American dream I've ever read about. That these three guys, related through very strong families, even though the families, got into domestic violence, got into all kinds of crazy crap, were able to rise up with the help of religion, with the help
and each other.
And each other, and the nuclear family, and music, and the word of Jesus Christ, able to achieve the American dream from 0 to 60. And I mean 0 to 60, to incredible opulent wealth and fame from dirt poverty. It's not just one guy. I mean, we got a lot of those, stories you could find, an Elvis story here and there, but the three of them together, I've never heard of a story like this other than the Three Stooges, but they were all brothers and subject of another episode of America's Untold Stories.
Honestly, they're being cousins. They were probably as close as many brothers.
Exactly.
Because they all lived in the same house. They'd be in and out of each other's houses. I mean, that was a very typical small town cousin type of thing.
Right. And also the age difference is so minimal. So they're coming of age, they're dating girls, they're doing all this stuff together,
Yeah, they're probably a good portion of their high school class, just the three of them.
Right. Yeah, it's a small school. Yeah, it's a very small school. But it's interesting because what Swaggart begins to do, other than other ministers, is he begins to weave in current events into his preaching. Current events like the Israeli 6-Day War. I mean, American politics. Nobody had done this. And this continues to bring a huge audience because he weaves current events into his preaching. That was a different thing. I mean, other preachers had touched on it, but he is doing this like you're getting the news every week from Jimmy Swaggart. And no one had used TV like he had used TV. He was so nice in front of the camera, and then he would go off the rails, then he'd come back, then he'd start weeping, then he'd start playing piano, then he had the incredible hot band with background singers. It was almost the perfect TV show, and it spread across the country to where he was buying up TV stations, and the budgets for these shows became higher and higher and higher, and to where you're seeing him in 1984. Later, they'll talk about Reagan. They'll talk about the moral majority a little bit in this interview. But that's the time of his peak, Eric. You know what I mean? When the moral majority was peaking, when Reagan was in power from 80, in that period of time, post Jimmy Carter.
Well, the 80s were weird, too, because it was like the three J's, if you're talking about the males. You have Jimmy Swaggart, Jim Baker, and Jerry Falwell. They all kind of were the top people of the time. I mean, Billy Graham was already there and established. So
he was Nixon's minister.
Right.
Billy Graham was with Nixon. I don't know who
and the Queen, apparently. Apparently, Queen Elizabeth took a liking to Billy Graham.
That's interesting.
According to the Crown, which is my source of knowledge.
Yeah, that's source of all knowledge.
The royal
By
family.
the way, thanks for telling me to watch South Park.
It was classic.
I really enjoyed that episode, Eric. Apparently, she's all bent out of shape now because American pop culture has now turned against her, Marco. And what karmic justice to have South Park turn against you. Two mega douchebags now on the outs with American pop culture. I mean, really, really karmic justice. You know what I mean? Where they're threatening to sue South Park.
I wish they did.
I wish they would. Please.
We'll have material for weeks.
Please. Right. It'll replace our dying Baldwin story.
Oh yeah, YouTubers everywhere will be covering that blanketed coverage. Right. And South Park, what I love about it is, if she does, I could just see them drafting an episode on the prince and his stupid wife. Oh God, they won't. It'll be like what they did with Chef when he turned on them for Scientology. Don't.
Right. Well, also Tom Cruise, And,
yeah.
The closet story was one of the greatest ones of all time. But anyway, so getting back to this, I mean, he's at the peak of his power, like in between 80, 84, when you're seeing him on that show. Now, there's a guy named Marvin Gorman. And the reason Marvin Gorman is important is because he is another evangelical minister in the Assemblies of God Church. And Marvin Gorman has a series of, at least alleged, affairs with prostitutes. And he is forced out by Jimmy Swaggart, who outs him. Right. So Marvin Gorman gets, who said that he was living $1 million a year lifestyle, not unlike Jimmy Swaggart in a huge house. Where does Marvin Gorman end up? Selling used cars in Ferriday, Louisiana, right?
Oh,
So,
no.
yeah. So it's a complete collapse of Marvin Gorman. So when Marvin Gorman finds out through hiring an investigative, a private investigator, that is this Gorman or?
Yeah, Marvin Gorman.
Okay, again, obviously weeks before his death.
Of course. Hey, I have a tradition to hold up here, dude.
So Gorman finds out that there may be some hanky-panky going on with Jimmy Swaggart, right? So I don't even know how to explain this, but there's a woman named Deborah Murphree, Murfhree, who is a prostitute. There she is. Yeah, she's got a couple of kids, and she needs to support these kids. She will later sell her story to Penthouse, which is we seeing that picture there. Whether she told the truth in the story is debatable. She did a lot of press. So she claims to have seen Jimmy Swaggart about 20 to 25 times as a customer, and in a motel outside somewhere. No, it was in New Orleans, actually, outside of New Orleans, like a Motel 6 kind of thing. And she goes public with this, and with the help of Marvin Gorman, gets revenge on Jimmy Swaggart. It's almost like Gorman's revenge. So the photo, the famous photo, which you were having, there it is. There's a photo.
It's hard to find this photo,
It's
folks.
hard to
It's
find
really tiny. I blew it
Yeah.
up as best I can, but it's really tough to get.
Now you say, who took this photo? This photo was taken by Marvin Gorman's son, who was a police officer and also a former client as with the prostitute, Deborah Murphree. He was a client or a customer of hers. Interesting bedfellows, huh, Eric?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So he takes the photo. Now, they were able, apparently, Gorman let the air out of Swaggart's tires. So when Swaggart comes, this is kind of brilliant. The paparazzi should learn from Gorman's son, Gorman Jr. He lets the air out of Swaggart's tires, so there's nowhere for him to go. And he doesn't know why he's got flat tires. So he's kind of standing around outside with Deborah Murphree, allowing him to snap these photos that they would sell to the, even the Inquirer wouldn't buy them, by the way.
Ouch. But Penthouse did.
Didn't stop Guccione, Sr., who paid her, I want to say, a couple of $1 million. I mean, she made out like a bandit in this thing. And I don't know if she went back to prostitution after that. I highly doubt it. She made nearly $1 million off of this Penthouse, then posing for Penthouse as a model, but also the storyline that she was selling. So this really devastates the Assemblies of God Church and what to do with Swaggart at this point. This is 1988, by the way. He is now.
They're coming for you.
That's the Swaggart police force. The Marvin Gorman. The situation is now a media frenzy around Swaggart, because keep in mind, Swaggart has made incredibly bold statements about politics, Eric. He has made incredible statements about liberals, and they're loaded for bear to take him down. And he must make amends because he has sinned. He has sinned against his Lord with one of the most famous televangelical broadcasts of all times. He goes on air into this incredible mea culpa, Jimmy Swaggart, where I don't know if you have any footage of this. Yeah, here it is. Okay.
I got it.
Let's see what you got here.
I want to address myself as best as I know how to those that I have wronged, that I have sinned against. First of all, my wife, Frances. God never gave a man a better helpmate and companion. And as far as this gospel has been taken through the ether waves to the great cities of the world and cover this globe, it would never have been done were it not for her strength.
That's true.
Her courage, her consecration to her Redeemer, the Lord Jesus Christ.
Not sure why the audio cuts in and out, but it does. It's actually hard to find pictures of her at the time.
Yeah, she later becomes a member of the church and will help rehabilitate him. She is a member of the church, obviously, but she becomes a preacher too. I don't know what's going on here, but
Minister of the gospel, a finer son than he has given me and
he's talking about his son Donnie,
his mother.
A preacher.
Donnie and my beautiful and lovely daughter-in-law, Debbie. Donnie has stood with me. I have relied upon him, and in these trying days, he and his mother and myself, we do not know what we would have done without his strength, his courage, and his utter devotion.
I think he's a preacher now. He's like there. I think he's 65 now and still preaching, Donnie.
Yeah, Jimmy's still alive.
Yeah.
1935, so he's
80.
Well up there. 88.
Yeah. Let's see if you move it forward a little bit, you may get a little bit of waterworks.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking for.
Okay.
I don't know why it's.
I serve.
There it is.
And I love and I worship. I bow at his feet, who has saved me and washed me and cleansed me. I have sinned against you, my Lord. Oh, Jesus. And I would ask that your precious blood would wash and cleanse every stain until it is in the seas of God's forgetfulness.
Get off the stage!
Never to be remembered against me.
Someone had the spirit.
Hello!
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. Wow. Anyway, so that performance, which is quite real. I mean, he's not making that up. That will last for about 2 years until he's caught with another prostitute in L.A. While driving on the wrong side of the road here in Hollywood at some point. So I guess his redemption lasted about 2 years after that.
Well, and it doesn't mean that people didn't make hay out of it in popular culture.
Yeah, there's a lot of pop culture involved.
Now available for the first time, the quintessential man of the cloth, Jimmy Swaggart, sings like you've never heard him before.
Oh, that's terrible, Eric. That's terrible. Yeah, that should be illegal. How dare you? That's a new low. A new low, honey. Dear God. The man was trying to be redeemed, honey. Dear God. I'm embarrassed to even be part of the show at this point.
Let Jimmy and the Angels of Mercy Singers touch your heart with gospel classics. He sings some of his nasty.
Yes, this part.
Like Two Like Three.
So holy. So holy.
Well, that's a little bit of an exaggeration on the part of Jim Carrey. Was that from Mad TV or?
But in Living Color,
Living Color.
I
Yeah.
hope it survives. But
Wow, that's a low blow, honey. How dare you?
Hey, everybody was getting into the spirit. I had to lighten it up.
Well, it must have been 1984, at the peak of his power, going backwards 4 years, he was a customer of mine at the Custom Shop shirt store on Fifth Avenue, which you can see in another episode Eric and I did on the Custom Shop. So Jimmy Swaggart came into the store to buy some shirts, and I think he ordered, I want to say 120 shirts with monograms and whatever different collars he had going on. And I tried to get his address out of him because the manager didn't know who he was, nor did anybody else in New York for that matter. But I said, "What's the address you want me to ship the shirts to, Jimmy?" This is me with Jimmy Swaggart. And he just says, Jimmy Swaggart, Baton Rouge, Louisiana. No zip code, no post office box. And I go downstairs to the we're upstairs. I go downstairs to the manager and I said, "Here's the order. It's 120 shirts. It's thousands of dollars." And he says, "You got to go back up there and get a post office box and a zip code out of this son of a bitch." And I went, "Don't send me up there, please, Charlie." I go back up and I go, "Reverend Swaggart, please, for the love of God." And I don't mean that to be funny. I just go, "For the love of God, can you please give me a post office box and a zip code," right? And he says, "Reverend Jimmy Swaggart, Baton Rouge, Louisiana. That's all it's got to be on there, Mark. That's the only thing you need." And again, I'm going up and down the stairs. This goes on like 2 or 3 times. He never gives me a post office box. He never gives me a zip code. Okay. I presume the shirts got there because because there was no problem with the shirts. However, that week, which was not the first time or the last time, Jerry Lee Lewis had checked himself into rehab. And I said to Jimmy Swaggart, "What is the deal with Jerry Lee going to rehab, Jimmy?" And all of a sudden, he goes full preacher on me, Eric, in the middle of the store. And he went, "Mark, Jerry has turned his back on the Lord and Satan himself has possessed his soul." And I went, "Whoa." And like the power of his voice almost knocked me back against the wall because we were like 3 feet apart. And he goes into full preacher mode, saying that Satan had possessed Jerry Lee's soul and it didn't look good for Jerry Lee surviving. He did survive. He did get out of rehab and he did live again. But it was not the end of Jerry Lee, obviously, who literally survived up until a few months ago.
Well, last year, he died last year, but
right.
But they killed him before he died. There was actually a running joke. He was declared dead, and then he came out and said, "I'm not dead yet."
Right.
And then he died a few months later.
You have that footage of the two of them performing together at the very end there, at the end of Jerry Lee's life?
Of course. Is it with them almost old and dead?
Yes, that's your specialty. I mean, that's your area of expertise.
Yeah.
He's playing with one hand, if I remember, at the end, Jerry Lee. I mean, this guy's
and then other family members are filling in, I think.
I think there's a backup.
The boys from Ferriday.
Yeah, this is from Swaggart's network. There's Jimmy Swaggart, and there's Jerry Lee.
All right.
Now, one of them.
As I travel through the pilgrim land, there's a friend who walks with me.
Leads me safely through the sinking sand, the Christ of Calvary.
This would be my prayer, dear Lord, each day. Help me do the best I can.
For I need that light to guide me day and night. Blessed Jesus, hold my hand.
Jesus, hold my hand. I need to get me out through the silver land. Protect me by thy power.
Jimmy actually had a pretty powerful voice.
Yeah. I mean, the amount of albums that he put out were, I don't even know how many albums that came out. They sold millions and millions of records. Nowhere near what Jerry Lee did. I think Jerry Lee Lewis sold about 400 million albums, some astronomically insane thing. But here's a couple of the covers of his albums, Swaggart. Looking for a city, sweet prayer, right? Sweet hourly prayer. On altar prayer. Jimmy Swaggart. It's kind of interesting that these three cousins, in a way, at Calvary. You think about Parsons and Hubbard and Anton LaVey. The three of them conspired to make a religion, and who would create money from creating a religion. Remember the famous bet between Parsons, LaVey, and Hubbard. Here are three guys who actually did this, made huge careers of themselves by using and being part of the church. They're almost like the anti-Hubbards, the anti-Parsons, the anti-Anton LaVeys. Someone to care. Oh, that's a great jacket. How do I get that jacket?
From the custom shop.
I got this. Yeah, I got this one from Jimmy Swaggart. This is one of my Mickey Gilley, Jimmy Swaggart line coming out this fall.
All right.
You can get a piece of that.
New merch store here.
America's Untold jackets. America's Untold jackets. I'll be bringing this with us to Vegas, I think, Eric, when we go.
Is that what you're going to wear? All right.
Oh, I'm going to bring it. I don't know what night I'm going to wear it, but I'm going to bring it with me because it's got Vegas written all over it.
Yeah, it does.
That'll be part of our attire. I guess March 12th when we go down to March 13th that weekend.
Absolutely.
So I mean, Swaggart, Mickey Gilley and Jerry Lee, three really America's Untold Story great Americans. I mean, all three super patriotic, all three super religious, all three brilliant musicians. Here they are together at the end. I mean, so many gold records.
This is 2020, so I mean, it's very recent.
2020. Gee, just 2 minutes ago.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. And I could recommend my movie pick early this week, Urban Cowboy. I'm going to go with it at Gilley's place. And then the other one, double feature, Great Balls of Fire with Dennis Quaid, which Eric showed at the beginning, which is a great movie. A little over the top. Dennis Quaid is unbelievable as Jerry Lee Lewis.
He is, yeah. But, and Alec can hold his own. I mean, I can trash Alec a lot, but
Baldwin was
he's pretty good. I mean, he's a good actor.
Yeah. He'll be free soon, too. He'll be free.
Yeah.
Anyway, so, I mean, this is just another way of looking at America's Untold Stories that you're not going to get in high school. Put it that way. Whoever that guy is. What was that guy? Spatty Matt or somebody? Sparty Matt. Who's a high school teacher?
I think so.
Yeah, let us come into your classroom, Eric and I will teach high school for one time a year.
And probably get him thrown out in addition to us.
Yeah. But anyway, so Marvin Gorman got some revenge on Jimmy Swaggart. But Swaggart comes back and rebuilds the ministry from the ground up and literally rebuilds the entire thing where you saw that recording there with Jerry Lee. So he was able to have redemption himself, Jimmy Swaggart.
Yeah, his church seems to be going now. His family, I think, is running it, but yeah, I mean, he's a survivor. Jim Baker survived his.
Right.
Jerry Falwell survived his. It's like, I guess it's all about forgiveness.
They all had a scandal, didn't they?
Yeah, it's wild.
It's wild. Tammy Baker. I mean, yeah. Wow.
Yeah, Tammy Faye was. I think she was in it. She was kind of the victim of the whole thing. Everybody made fun of her makeup, and then it was like they made fun of her so much that it eventually turned.
Yeah.
And then people felt like, wow, why are we beating up on this poor woman? And then she kind of pulled out and became almost a Dolly Parton type of figure, like pretty beloved by a lot of folks.
Well, we had a Reverend Donald Wildman, Wildmon, who came after us at Lampoon. He had a group called something family, something on the family or something. And he hooked up with Ed Meese, the Attorney General, and they took us, Penthouse and Playboy, off the newsstands and made us be in paper bags behind the counter, which devastated all three of our circulations as publications.
Yeah, I mean, that's what killed Lampoon ultimately, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was Reverend Donald Wildman. Not affiliated with these guys, but I think he was an evangelical. I think he might have been Assemblies of God. I'm not sure.
And it's because you weren't fully pornography enough.
Yeah, we
You
were.
can't, you couldn't survive it. You were like just comedy.
Right.
And the other ones, it was like, no, people are still going to go for it, even with the reduced sales.
But having to ask for it behind, when you have a high newsstand presence in the magazine business and you don't see it, nobody asks for it. Not out of embarrassment. It's just out of sight, out of mind, Eric. What I mean? It's something, when you see it, you'd pick it up at the newsstand on the way out. But to put it behind the counter really devastated. We went from 1 million circ to 250,000.
Wow.
Yeah. And Penthouse and Playboy took huge hits too. Huge hits by this movement, this evangelical movement, along with Ed Meese operating as an attorney general. So the one we've got now, the new attorney general, there are other attorney generals in American history who've done equally bizarre things to the American public.
Well, I mean, with the current woke culture, they would probably be wanting to showcase them as long as they were covering the most offensive things possible to most people.
Yeah, there's a book.
Be like, remove the covers and put it in your face. As long as they're in drag, then we're good. Celebrate it now.
Right, but I'm just saying it's equally as bizarre, just in another direction. You know what I mean? There's a guy, we may do an episode on this guy. He's an FBI agent who infiltrated the Weather Underground, and as opposed to infiltrating the Proud Boys, this guy infiltrated the Weather Underground, and I thought we may do an episode on him.
Yeah, I'm interested in that.
I know you're interested now. What?
Is he still alive?
I don't know if he's still alive. The book's from the 70s, so
I'll have to look,
he was part of a group. We'll get into it in the episode. It was part of a group of long hair FBI agents who went undercover on the left. Just, it might be a good balance as to where we are today to show this episode. Larry Grothwall, I think his name was.
I'll have to look. Well, I had I think it was Dana Ridenauer who went undercover with like Earth First and the environmental groups for the she was FBI undercover.
Yeah. This was on the West Coast and involved the Weather Underground, and he made a number of arrests and just the opposite of what's going on today. Politically, the opposite. Put it that way.
It'd be nice to see.
Okay. Well, oh, by the way, the Yiddish word of the day is klutz. Klutz with a K.
Okay. What did you do?
Why. I don't know. I dropped so much stuff today. You ever drop a bottle of vitamins on the floor? And have to pick up every single vitamin.
Well, the ones that don't fly under the fridge.
Right. Well, they're under the fridge forever. Those are never.
Yeah, exactly. And you're like, son of a.
You drop a bottle of medicine or vitamins that's got 100 pills in it, you're going to be busy for a while.
Well, you know what the worst is? What? Is like Claritin. Go and drop a bottle of that with those little tiny freaking, like the size of a pinhead.
Oh yeah.
Pills. Then they spatter. It's like, oh, jeez. Forget about it.
The word is klutz, Klutz, for people writing it down at home.
That one I think is pretty universal.
Yeah. Well, a lot of them are universal. They've woven themselves into American vernacular. So a lot of them are universal today.
Well, speaking of universal, we have a lot of support that's come in.
Really?
From locals.
Let me take a look at this. Let me see what you got, Hunley.
All right. Well, and locals, we actually have tips on there. And for folks who don't know, this is from now on, we are streaming every episode of America's Untold Stories on Locals with its own private chat. And there's tips in there. And I always try to favor Locals a little bit because that's our community. Tarkina sent a $5 tip. They want a cowboy. It's a $5 tip for starting a Mark Robert cowboy hat fund. Your jacket.
Look at this. He sold 17 million albums. Swaggart in 1980 got nominated for a Grammy for best performance for traditional gospel.
There you go. Wells Mortensen sent a $5 tip. Wouldn't miss the pointy hair for all the gold in Fort Knox.
Well,
but here's to a low star bolo tie instead.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna get a bolo tie. That's for Vegas. Yeah, I'm gonna go bolo. Yeah.
And then there's another tip for one with the American Eagle, and they're sharing shots of bolo ties in the locals chat.
Okay, all right.
And then another tip. So there you go. You're getting your bolo
fund. The bolo
together.
Yeah.
Um,
I have to get a Belzer book to give away to people if anybody wants to fund some Belzer books.
yeah, Jeff.
That would be a good gift to give away in Vegas. The Belzer 100 hits book.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I'm actually, hopefully I remember. I plan to give this away in Vegas.
Oh, that's a big one. Yeah, you're going to have to get another bag on the plane. That's going to involve
Yeah, I might.
checking that bag on the plane.
I might. Let me see. Jeff SK sent a $5 tip. Regardless of these charlatans, God will move on despite them.
I don't think all of them are charlatans. I used to think that, but now I'm rethinking it. I've come full circle on Swaggart. I've come full circle on Swaggart.
There's a question here too. Mark, thoughts on shows like The Chosen taking off or the Jesus Revolution movie?
I don't know what that is. What's The Chosen?
Okay, I think
Robbie Benson, the movie The Chosen with Robbie Benson? Hasidic Jewish, played by Robbie Benson, and cultural assimilation of the worst kind.
I guess so.
Right. Okay. The movie's pretty good, actually, The Chosen.
All right. Let me see. Wells Mortensen sent another tip towards your Bolo fund. And Pasha is sending a $2 tip on locals.
What a klutz that Pasha is. That guy is such a klutz, Hunley.
Yeah, I know. It's bad news too when he's out moiling. You don't want to be a klutz when moiling.
Right. You got to be real.
Is that a verb? Is moiling an activity? Okay, I don't know.
That's another Hunley original.
Hey, you know what? From the start of life to the end of life. Got you covered.
Yeah, that's your wheelhouse.
Yes, I have range from. All right, so we got some super chats here. Spiffy Coat, Mark.
Thank you.
And then
that's country.
Stool Purger out of Australia. Hi, Pooper Troopers.
Wow. What's going on down under that toilet?
Maybe, I don't know. Sir Lawrence, $5. And I saw these coming in. Tall Paul, 521 was Mickey Gilley's opening act.
Who was this guy? Oh, yeah. He was, whoever this guy is. Oh, that's great. That's great.
And he was saying that Mickey died May 7th, 2022, and he was at the memorial.
Oh, fantastic. Wow. What a great life. What a long life. What a great life these guys had. I mean, really American originals. They really are. All three of them.
Yeah, it was American.
Really, yeah. That's why I didn't want to just focus on Swaggart. You can't just focus on Swaggart without the other two cousins.
Yeah, it's fair. Sir Lawrence meant to apologize to Mark for saying he looked like Bob Dole last week until he said Stossel looked like Planet of the Apes.
Well, he had hair all over his face. I don't know. I mean,
it's fine.
It was just a throwaway line. I don't think I look like Bob Dole, though. I mean, that's a little much. Except, occasionally I've got this pencil stuck in my hand here, and I can't really get it out.
Oh, Elwood Bryant.
Didn't Bob Dole talk of himself in the third person?
Well, Clint Eastwood did to Chair.
Right. No. But Dole said, Bob Dole doesn't think that way.
Could be.
Yeah.
I don't remember on that. Let me see. Elwood. Larry Flint rocked it when he had Jimmy's crying photo on the inside cover of Hustler, which read, "Why is this man crying?" Because he didn't have the sense to subscribe.
That's funny. We should do something like that. See, Flint was a good marketer. He knew what to do.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, he got shot by some maniac.
Yeah, who didn't like his marketing. Justin Moore gave us a little something for our collection plate.
Heal.
I like this. Notice the piano on fire is a Baldwin.
Oh, that's funny. That's fine. I didn't notice that. Very good.
Will you do a show on Louis Mountbatten, who with Solly Zuckerman greenlit the original Nightmare on Elm Street?
I don't know anything about that. It's that's a little obscure for even us. I mean, people who greenlit Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yeah. Best Mardi Gras episode ever. Yes. Happy Mardi Gras, by the way, Mark.
Oh, what's today? Is today Fat Tuesday?
Yeah.
Oh, I completely forgot.
Yeah. Last year, people want to check it out, Mark made me wear a toga for the show.
Oh, yes. That was last year. Yeah.
So world's largest toga party, I think is the episode name.
This is a weird. Now I'm getting stuff over here. Heather Rose just donated $10 just because.
Oh, on PayPal. Thank you.
Yeah, Heather Rose. How do you like that? Obviously a stage name. Her real name is Deborah Gavinsky.
Yeah.
What does that say, Hunley?
Let me see. It says, you say God loves you, coming by the good news. Then you buy the president and swimming pools. If Jesus don't save till we're lining your pockets, God must be dead if you're alive. It sounds like a song lyrics.
Yeah, it sounds like something. Yeah, I think that's from Alice Cooper's second album.
Speaking of somebody who is born again.
Yeah.
Beverly Fitch, this is turning out to be a great episode.
See that, Beverly? And people, it's amazing how many times people go, I'm not going to watch this. I'm not even interested in this.
I know the chat, when I put it up.
It happens all the time. Why would I care about Jimmy Swaggart?
I know. In the chat, when I put this up, there's somebody in there's like, I'm out of here. See you next week.
Right. Good luck. Good luck. Thanks for stopping by. You know, we've only done how many episodes, Hunley? You figure they'd have a little bit of faith in us. And I use the word faith intentionally.
Of course. Billy Graham didn't have a scandal. He was a good guy. Not everybody had a scandal.
Hold on. Let me just back that up for a couple of seconds. If you want to listen to Billy Graham on the Nixon White House tapes denouncing the Jews, I would say that he might have had a scandal, Billy Graham. One of the most anti-Semitic preachers in American history. Go on.
Okay.
Jesus Christ.
My Aunt Laura Dune wanted to know if Ruth and Michael Payne knew that Oswald didn't kill JFK. Why didn't they come forward to at least make him look not guilty?
Well, I think they might have had an employer that would have frowned upon that. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think they wouldn't have gotten their health benefits.
And he wasn't around long enough for them to do it anyway. You know, it's like he was gone in a couple
day
of days.
Are they going to do that? Saturday or Friday?
Oh, Pasha. I was literally typing my what's the Yiddish word of the day super chat, and when you mentioned it, I feel like such a klutz.
Right. Well, I wanted to get ahead of the curve, or in your case, the clerve.
Oh. Catherine S. with a 1999 super sticker. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Catherine S.
Tony Bug, where is the Vegas meetup? It is in Vegas.
Oh, boy, is this guy out of touch?
The location. No. Barnes is not going to release the location until the day of the event.
Well, I don't think you can get in anyway anymore until you get the ticket, and you can't get a ticket.
No, but even those who have a ticket, he's going to tell everybody that day for security purposes.
Not to be confused, this is not a meetup. So just to go backwards for a second, don't be deceived that this is a meetup. It's not. It's a paid admission with tickets only, run by Barnes. So it's not a meetup. Yeah,
even though they call it a meetup.
Who's called? I'm not calling it a meetup.
They are.
Oh, they are. Oh,
yeah. I just
raise the limit to 150 and let the people come in, Barnes. You know, might understand rock and roll, brother.
No, this is a guy who went to Woodstock where they gave up. We took
the fences down. I went to 2 Woodstocks.
All right. Scott Biddle, $2. Thank you. Pasha, being a mole at the start of life to the end of life. It's the same thing if you're a klutz.
Right. Oh, yeah. That's if you're a klutz, Moyle might not be the job for you.
The Chosen is the largest crowd-funded serial show ever.
But it's also a movie with Robbie Benson, or I don't understand.
I guess it's a show. It's a crowd-funded show. I don't know where it's playing, but interesting.
It's playing at a crowd-funded theater near you.
Oh, it's streaming somewhere, dude. There's so many streaming. I
know. It's hard to tell. You have to say Hulu or something. Otherwise, you could look for the rest of your life.
Yeah. I mean, and don't get me started. It's when the Dead Kennedys moral majority. Okay.
Oh, right. Okay. All right.
I knew it sounded like, I was like, that sounds like.
That means D.H. Pellegro.
Yeah. Speaking of which, somebody else you knew.
Who's dead?
Jimmy's alive.
Jimmy's alive. Jimmy's alive.
Colonel Fletcher Prouty show, please.
I don't know about that. I don't know. It's not much there.
He'll at least be mentioned in other shows.
Yeah, I don't think there's enough for a whole show. I mean, unless you want to get into his complete embracement and endorsement of Scientology.
Not really.
Right. So, is that what the guy wants to hear? How he got bought by Scientology and they owned him and he went out speaking on their behalf? Is that really helpful?
I'm not really sure. Oh, we got Rumble Rants. Look at that.
Oh, look at that.
Miss Mia Santiago.
I'm going to endorse Blue Edition Red Bull, which is blueberry.
Okay. Well, Mia's saying, could there be an AUS on Benny Hinn, the dude that hits people with his jacket and they keel over to be healed?
Was he American or was he a transplant from?
He might have been imported. I don't know.
Yeah. I forget about that guy. But I don't know anything about him, so it doesn't matter. He's of no influence to me. I know it. I don't know.
All right.
I'm not into preachers for the sake of preachers. Swaggart, I met and had a conversation with, which is why I did the episode.
Fair enough. 63 Telecaster.
Yeah.
God bless both of you.
Yeah, thank you.
And then 7 McCoy 7 said, if the price of flour rises, how much will and I guess you say challah cost?
Challah. It's called challah.
Yeah, it's that throat clearing stuff.
Challah.
Challah.
Yeah,
challah.
I guess it'll be more expensive.
I guess.
We'll switch to matzah, which doesn't have any yeast, is unleavened bread. And next month, I guess, is Passover, or as you people say, the Last Supper. We'll be using matzah as Jesus did during the Last Supper.
All right. Well, that covers that. And of course, we've got to get.
Hunley's reaching for it.
Yeah, well, I got to reach for it because Viva and Barnes are on at 7:00. I don't want to be, running over on them.
Sure, we could go up against them. What's the big deal?
Yeah, we can go up against them and watch the number go. But Oswald is here. But in addition to Oswald,
what do you have now? You got some glasses or something? Or?
Yeah, I do.
Hunley's got an entire factory back there.
Ziggy.
Yeah.
Ziggy, aka Sarah, has made some different glasses for us, and I put a link in the description. So you get America's Untold Stories, and this is a Pilsner style.
Ooh.
What I really like, though, is we also have like Team Oswald. There's a Team Grow Bear, but nobody likes that.
What?
But this is like a good general.
Is there a Team Grow Bear?
Yes.
Oh, wow. All right. I have to buy those.
Yeah. I guess somebody has to. Here we go. The Team Grow Bear whiskey glass.
Oh my, look at that. Wow, I'll use that when I go on Viva talk about alcoholism.
There you go. And then if you want to just go straight, you can give us a shot.
Oh, give us a shot. I like that. That's what JFK said at the end.
So there's a link in the description. You can just go to ericunley.com/Ziggy, but there's a link there for folks to check that out.
Mm-hmm.
And there's wine glasses, stemless, stemmed.
There's David Weinglass, who was an attorney in the Chicago 7 case. Don't forget David Weinglass.
There you go.
Right.
That would be very funny if you just had a wine glass and you just put David.
Right. David Weinglass. That would be funny. You can also follow me at Lord Buckley on Twitter, where chances are you'll eventually be blocked.
Yes, and don't ask me to do it.
Don't go crying to Hunley when you get blocked and say, I don't know why he blocked me, for saying the most asinine thing on earth, and then you get blocked. And then
I don't know what it is, but and the people are like, why?
They need to remember what they said to get blocked. I find that fascinating. You know what I mean?
Well, what's the last one?
I don't possibly remember. I'm just a blocker. You know what I mean?
I know the last one who reached out to me, I just said, I don't know. He's a grumpy boomer.
Right. That's totally. There's also a guy who needs to collect books and get a lot of stuff from the book fund. So if you want to PayPal me for the JFK book fund, nobody's going to block you from doing that. I want to get some of those Belzer books as commemorative items for Vegas and also for myself. I gave mine away. I don't even have a Belzer book. So
good idea.
That's on PayPal. But yeah, Lord Buckley, PayPal. My book is up there, which I'm going to be discussing with Viva, I think next week. Rehab Nation: Inside the Secret World of Celebrity Rehabs, on Amazon. It's down below Hunley's name or whatever that Hunley's got going over there.
It's in the description.
Wait a second. What about subscribing, Hunley?
There's a big red button.
Oh, there it is. There it is.
They can subscribe now. Everybody.
There it is, my friends. The red cape to a bull. There you go. You want a red flag? There it is. Hunley just put it up for you. Go ahead. Now do your subscribing. Go ahead, big shots. Let's see you subscribe now. No more Mr. Nice Guy.
We might even break 57,000.
Yeah,
today.
God forbid we should break 60,000 before I leave this earth. But
who knows? Who knows? You never know. It can happen.
If we ever, what do we get when we get to 100? What happens when we get to, if we ever get to 100?
We get a plaque from YouTube.
Right.
It's carved, and
is it like a button? It looks like a button.
It's a silver play button. So there's like a YouTube play button in the middle. It's silver, and then just congratulations.
Like a gold record, but in the YouTube industry.
Yeah, sure.
Something to live for.
Which will prop behind us, and you'll have to move the key from the city aside or do something.
Oh, all right, I'll do that. I'll move Dylan aside, and then we'll move.
Yeah, right.
Right. The Believers movie pick of the week, and Urban Cowboy. The Believers, Urban Cowboy. Oh, what else did I say? Great Balls of Fire.
Yep. And to close us out, here's little Jimmy Swaggart on piano, little clip to go with
very good, Hunley.
Our exit. So we will see you on Freeform Friday.
Friday.
Well, coming on through, me and you, your blessings coming for you.
Thank you.